Very, very good evening. Well, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, and welcome to what is very much the start of winter if you happen to be up north, as I am. Everybody in the show today is down in the Cape, and they're all looking a lot warmer than we find ourselves here in Johannesburg, where I suspect we're in for a rather chilly winter, which means we shall need some rather good red wine to see off the worst of that winter, which means today's show is a perfect warm-up for the season ahead, because today on Dan Really Likes Wine with Norman Goodfellows, we are celebrating a grape that for a long time, and I've made this point quite a few times on the show of late, was one that hid in the shadows somewhat. It was always the best supporting actor, never the lead, and that was Cabernet Franc, where as one of the 5 key red Bordeaux varietals, it often played an important role, and in some cases did play a dominant role, but it was rare to find it regularly as a single variety. But thanks to people like Norma Radcliffe and subsequently Breur Raats, we find Cabernet Franc starting to nudge into the limelight. And then over the last 4 or 5 years, the number of producers making a standalone Cabernet Franc has grown, as have the number who are doing so particularly well. And so today on the show, we have 4 of the producers who I find make a Cabernet Franc that tends to not last very long in the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar. One of those is JD from Warwick, Norma Radcliffe's old home, and so a key Cabernet Franc to have with us. Callan joins us from the Garajeest with her Cabernet Franc. One that we've drunk much of in this particular cellar would be the Anthonij Rupert, and Dawie is with us, and Anton joins us as well from Rainbow's End. So a great collection of Cabernet Franc. They've all got their own idiosyncrasies, their own nuance, their own particular style, but the broad story that they tell is of a grape that I think more and more South Africans are discovering the delight of, and more winemakers are putting some time and effort into. So today we ask our quartet of superstars exactly why they feel Cabernet Franc gives them so much to work with, and why it's starting to find its way into the limelight. It's certainly not in the Cabernet Sauvignon space just yet, but it's definitely heading in the right direction. So that is today's show, a celebration of Cabernet Franc as we look to face a long, cold winter in South Africa. And we'll meet our guests in just a moment. Before we do that, though, here's a quick look at the latest wine news. This is coming up in Franschhoek. It's a really cool concept. It is eat, sleep, drink, and that pretty much explains it. Your chance to combine both staying in some of the cooler spots in Franschhoek with eating in some of the best, and getting around some terrific wine estates such as Anthonij Rupert, who feature on today's show. I've always had a very soft spot for Franschhoek. When I was at the University of Cape Town, it was somewhere we'd get away to for weekends whenever we could. It was still a little off the beaten track then, and that's not because I'm very old, just because 20 years ago it was a little quieter. It's still utterly charming. This is a great opportunity to perhaps see some parts of Franschhoek that you haven't before. Discover a new restaurant, meet a new winemaker, visit a new hotel or boutique B&B. So you can either head over to the Franschhoek Tourism website or jump onto Dine Plan, go and see what they have available. And it's under that Franschhoek Valley of Dreams, under the guidance of the team at Franschhoek Tourism. So head online, go and have a look, and maybe book yourself a nice winter getaway in Franschhoek. You won't be disappointed. Now, this is coming up next week. Reciprocal, actually, not this week. It's this week on Wednesday. This is from 4:30 until 7 at Pilrig, the home of a Reciprocal Wine Company. Your chance to try some wine from Spain, from Italy, and from France. 20 odd wines available, some really good deals. And what I like about this is 495 Rand is the most expensive wine available. So you'll be able to check out some really cool international wines, and maybe you're picking some up. But I think what you're really doing here is, under the guidance of Michael Friedjohn's team, getting to discover that just because a wine is international, it doesn't have to be ludicrously priced. And just because it's under 500 Rand a bottle and international doesn't mean it is a cheap export fobbed off on the South African market. Some great value value to be had, some really interesting wine, and it's all got the fridge on touch. So join Reciprocal. That's this Wednesday, 17th of April at Pilrig for some international treats at a very, very good price. And then this is coming up. It's actually not, my apologies there. That's a lunch, not a dinner. But we will be seeing, we've got an event coming up with Ken Forrester next week. So apologies there. We'll get the correct details to you on the show next Monday. The details there have changed ever so slightly. A message as we kick off the show from Grant Wilkinson, who's watching on Facebook, saying the Warwick Cab Franc back in the day was really good in my opinion. However, I've never had a Cab Franc in about 15 years. And Grant, I don't think you are unique here, because Cabernet Franc is still something that doesn't come across everybody's radar, partly because it's not a grape that has quite the same PR team behind it as something like Cabernet Sauvignon, but also there are limited numbers of people making it, and those who do tend to make it in somewhat smaller volumes. So finding a great Cabernet Franc, it sometimes takes a little work, but not nearly as much as it used to, because there is far more really good Cabernet Franc available as a single varietal today than there was a decade and more ago. And that is in no small part thanks to the quartet of makers who joined me on the show today. So a very, very warm welcome to Anton Malan from Rainbow's End, one of the great views in the winelands, my fellow Zimbabwean, Callan Williams of the Garajeest, Dawie Botha, who is head of very good red wine at Anthonij Rupert, and JT Pretorius, who is Norma Radcliffe reborn in a rugged, chiseled, square-jawed, bearded form. Guys, welcome. Lovely to have you all on the show. And discussing a grape that I know means a great deal to all four of you, and a grape that, as I've said, is now a lot more prevalent, a lot more in the spotlight than it was not that long ago. JD, if we go back, probably 20, 25 years ago, Norma would have been giving us our first Cabernet Franc, and I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was about then, and it was the first single varietal Cabernet Franc that South Africa produced. Would that be correct?
Yes, Dan, exactly. A little bit earlier than that, pushing 40 years. 1988 was the first Cabernet Franc that she bottled under the Warwick label, which was also the first, as you correctly mentioned, in the country. So Norma was king of the first, or the queen of the first. She was way ahead of her time. I explained to somebody else that if she was doing what she was doing today, she'd still be ahead of the time. So, but yeah, we're very thankful for that, because now obviously we've got 30 odd years of farming Cabernet Franc on Warwick, and a lot of detail that we wouldn't have had without her.
She clearly saw something that maybe other winemakers hadn't. Part of that is, well, she was just a wine visionary, and she demonstrated that in so many different ways. But what do you think, from talking to her, from knowing the vines at Warwick, from knowing the Cabernet Franc history at Warwick, what do you think it was that said to Norma, you know what, I think Cabernet Franc deserves its own platform, deserves its own space in the sun?
Yeah, well, she was definitely a visionary and operated in a very different manner. And she also was not really defined by conventional rules. She came from outside of the industry, didn't have a classical background. So I think she was a little bit more willing to take risks and try new things. And yeah, we're super glad she did. And obviously it showed potential from the start. We actually had a bottle of the 88 on Friday for lunch with the team from Fells, which are importers into the UK. 12.5% alcohol, incredibly light and vibrant, and yeah, fresh and clean. It's unbelievable. So clearly there was detail from the get-go, and like I said, I think she just she wasn't defined or held back by any kind of rules. Like Cabernet Sauvignon is the classic one, so you can't bottle the Franc on its own. So she probably just had a bit more guts than anybody else at the time.
And it clearly worked out really well. And she set what is now a trend, as she did in so many different spaces. She was a big part of it. The other part, I'd imagine, would be that Cabernet Franc and the terroir of Warwick do seem to be rather natural partners.
Exactly. It's a grape that suits well to where we are. So we're on the northern end of Stellenbosch, so the kind of furthest you can go away from the ocean along the Simonsberg. So we kind of bookended to the one end by Klapmutzkop, and then the other side to the tail end of the Simonsberg. So we're slightly warmer. We do have kind of a large portion of the estate has northerly facing slopes. We also have some west slopes, and then a few southeasterly slopes, and very deep kind of red clay soils, very, very vigorous soil types, so a lot of growth potential. So all of those factors combined tend to really kind of give Cabernet Franc an opportunity to ripen. It's very different to what you'll find out of Somerset West or Elgin. So a little bit more powerful, a little more into the Cabernet Sauvignon style, but still with that kind of trademark herbal element, that lovely kind of floral, violet, lavender, rosemary lift that it gives the wine. So you end up having a lovely perfumed wine that still has structure, but not as powerful as the Cabernet, and just a little bit more refined, a little bit more finessed. So I think it's suited perfectly to Warwick's terroir.
Mitre Veg watching on Instagram, suggesting that Norma has a wonderful legacy. She certainly does. She's one great woman of South African wine. Another one watching is Angela Lloyd. Lovely to have you on the show, Angela. I see Bear Robertson watching as well, and Derek Prout-Jones, and Andrew Walgar watching over in America. Great to have you all on the show this evening. The Cabernet Franc of Warwick is one I've drunk a lot of. The Cabernet Franc of Anthonij Rupert is one, Dawie, that always brings back, unfortunately, a great sadness, because I had a case, and I very foolishly on Christmas Day a few years ago opened a single bottle as a treat for my family. And about an hour later, the case was flattened because they'd all fallen in love with it instantly. It's certainly one of my favorite wines that you make, and an example of Cabernet Franc that I just delight in. Where does Cabernet Franc sit in your heart as a winemaker?
Cabernet Franc is always somewhere. If it's a single varietal or in a blend, it's always a fan favorite of ours. So we don't have this illustrious history of Cab Franc on Anthonij Rupert wines. First one we did was as a single varietal was 2005, but since then we've started growing it, and we found out that it actually works very well on our decomposed granite soils, northern slopes. So we get a much darker fruit profile, more your plummy flavors and some cherry blossoms and violets. And I'd say in 05 we actually made the Cab Franc, the Cab Sauv, and the Merlot separately, just to see how they will age after bottling, just to see what happens before we actually started working towards a blend of sorts. And eventually we found that the Cab Franc was actually standing head and shoulders above the rest on its own. So that's why we decided to actually start working and making it a successful single varietal on the farm.
If we go back to before Cabernet Franc had this lead actor role, it was always part of a Bordeaux blend. That's a reference point that many people will be more familiar with than Cabernet Franc on its own. If you are drinking a Cabernet Franc dominated Bordeaux blend, or a blend that's got a fair chunk of Cabernet Franc, what role is that Cabernet Franc playing in the Bordeaux blend, and how does it play off the Merlot or the Cabernet Sauvignon or the Malbec or the Petit Verdot that's also involved in that style of wine?
Well, personally, if you look at Cabernet Franc in a blend, it usually fleshes out your mid palate and part of your fruit profile, and that solid finish as well, where Cab Sauv usually is your backbone, and Merlot your nose for the freshness as well. And we use Petit Verdot just to round it off as well. It's almost like salt and pepper on a dish. But what I really like about most South African Cab Francs is you almost get a typical Cape Fynbos character in a wine, or overseas you'll explain a green tea leaf with your dark fruit or brighter fruit, depending on where you are. But that's always that typical Fynbos character that I really love about Cab Franc.
So it's got such a key role to play in a Bordeaux blend, and it does so remarkably well, but it's now found its own feet. Were you surprised when you produced a Cabernet Franc, or when you tasted it for the first time, and just how well it had done on its own?
Yeah, we played around. We didn't get it spot on from the get go. We did different, not different styles, but we had different pickings, earlier picking, riper pickings. But we found that we've got a nice red fruit stage that we do get. I always say if you harvest Cab Franc a tad bit too early, you get too much of that herbaceous flavors that we actually don't want. You want a little bit of that green tea leaf, but if you should harvest it on that red fruit stage, you get that nice brightness. Also, not harvesting it too ripe because then you also go more towards the jammy character that you also don't want. You want to find that sweet spot in the middle that we actually do like, and then also work on your. We worked a lot on our barrel program to get the right French oak for our Cab Franc. And we're still to there. Every year is a work in progress, but we are nailing it down. We're getting it right, I hope.
Well, I've got an extended Greek family who would suggest that you're definitely getting it right, and I'll keep it under lock and key when I have some in the cellar. Let's head over to Callan, somebody else who's Cabernet Franc. I've got a very, very soft spot for. Cabernet Franc is, I think, the first wine of yours I had, and that was my introduction to the magic of the Garajeest. What was it about Cabernet Franc, Callan, that swayed you and made you think, yeah, this is the grape for me?
So, I think you might have had my maiden vintage, actually. That was probably the first wine of mine that you had, which was in 2015. And Cabernet Franc is a cultivar that's really close to my heart. It is one of my favorite cultivars. So starting off my brand and my business, I really wanted to make straight varietals. That was my vision for my brand. And that's purely because I find that making a wine as a straight varietal, the wine is more honest. So it's an honest representation of the cultivar, the terroir, the region. So that was purely it. I wanted to make my favorite cultivar, which was Cabernet Franc, in the style that best represented it, really. So 10 years later, and I'm still in love with it. So that's really that was really how I started out with the cultivar and the grapes, and it's been quite a journey as well.
There's always a difference with winemakers and their grapes. In some cases, you get along famously and you don't have to do too much with them. With other varietals, they can be a little more troublesome. What is Cabernet Franc like as a grape to work with as a winemaker?
Sure. I've actually found Cabernet Franc quite difficult. They call Pinot Noir the heartbreak grape, but I wouldn't say that Cabernet Franc is too far off. It's quite temperamental. I think we're getting on now. But it took a while. It took at least 5 years to get the grapes to where I would like them. It's in my opinion, my experience, it's quite a temperamental a grape. I think it's a female.
I shall make no comment whatsoever before the internet please jump upon me, or more specifically my wife. The wine that you make is, I think if you've drunk a lot of Cabernet Franc, yours is quite striking. It does tend to stand out in terms of the style you embrace. Dawie's referenced the fact that you pick it a little early, it can be a bit green, and I've certainly had some in that space. I've also had some that nod towards that jammier end of the spectrum. What is the style you look to embrace, and how much does the grape listen to you? How much are you able to direct and influence where you want it to go?
So initially, when I started out, I always say this, is that it felt like I had no idea what I was doing, but it still feels that way. So, I learned, I worked with what I had, and I learned how to adapt to the grape. if that makes sense. So initially my maiden vintages were actually quite jammy. I was at that stage picking on like phenols and just maybe the feel of the grapes and when they were ready. And I did get a lot more jammy characters, but I was 24 at the time. I was very young. I had very little experience. And as time went on, myself as a winemaker, I'd like to think I have improved, and with every vintage my wine improved as I did. So what I would like to say is my style is a lot more refined, very elegant and feminine. It's a softer styled Cabernet Franc, very approachable, still has the structure. Depending on the weather or the mood or the moon, I pick up different characteristics. So it's quite interesting what I pick up versus what friends pick up. Sometimes I get that sun-dried tomato character, sometimes more spice, more herbaceous. So in terms of style, it's my Cabernet Francs are very elegant. That's how I would describe them.
I think it's a very honest appraisal, particularly of your starting point. There was a nudge of jam to some of the early stuff. I still think it's lovely wine, but it definitely has transitioned and grown, and ever more a delight. As is the case with the wine at Rainbow's End, Andrew Woolgart from Elephant's Corner on Instagram telling us that he's about to unpack a shipment of wine from South Africa, including a Rainbow's End consignment, which in turn will include some Cabernet Franc. Anton, taking your wine to the world and taking the success story. And I think for me, the biggest illustration of just how good Rainbow's End Cabernet Franc is that people actually get distracted from the view by the wine. And given how good your view is, that's quite some achievement.
Well, that is a compliment, because our view is spectacular. Not to be arrogant, we're very lucky to have a view like this. But yeah, no, I'm a absolute passionate Cabernet Franc guy, and I fell in love with it when I tasted a Cab Franc out of a barrel from a friend of mine. That was in 2000 when he started to plant a farm, and I always had this. It just stuck in my mind, and like you all know, there wasn't much Cab Franc around except for Rats and Warwick, basically. And yeah, then we started to plant the farm, and 25% of the Cab Franc was basically planted to make a Bordeaux blend. And I was so excited to make it on its own. And in 2005, I did it. We were lucky enough that we could make each clone separately. So we planted 3 different clones, which makes a massive impact on the style of a Cab Franc. So you can get your 312 Bordeaux clone that gives more the red fruit and more elegancy. But your clone 1, the South African clone, I think Warwick uses that as well. And then your mostly planted Loire clone 214, it's got different characters. Your 214 gives more the freshness, the mintiness, the spicy characters, sometimes a bit of the tea leaf, the more greener character. And then the clone 1 is that dark cherry, black cherry. So I like to play around with the clones, and I figured out, I think, what works for us, that we've now created 2 styles of Cab Franc. I've released my first Cab Franc in 2005, which was only 1, and then I split it up in 2007 in 2 Cab Franc styles. The one a limited release, which only is 1 single vineyard with 1 Bordeaux clone, the 312 that gives the more red fruit elegant style. And I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of people, Cabernet Sauvignon people, that say they don't want Cab Franc because they don't like the green undertones. And I got, with that limited release Bordeaux 312 style clone, I got them into Cab Franc, and then I went and showed them the typical Cab Franc, which is my other style, which is a combination of the 1 and 214, which the black cherry, dark cherry, blended with the Loire clone, which is still my favorite clone. More the fresh, the slight vegetative tomato leaf character. But the big criticism about Cab Franc always has been that they don't like the green, the grassiness, and it's really, if you look at the Cab Francs these days in South Africa, there's few that I can complain it's too green and vegetative and grassy. And I think I've done that from 2005, making sure it's more on the riper style. In Banhoek, where we are, also like we've got the decomposed granite swirls, northern aspect. but really you battle to make any green varietal or any jammy varietal, sorry, in Bangkok. And that's the same for Cabernet Franc. So your biggest mistake will be picking too early rather than too late regarding our terroir. I know other terroirs, maybe what Raj work with, or the Dolomite swirls, that's a different story. But yeah, so I fell in love with it. We're a small boutique winery, so I started selling the wine myself in 2006 when we started to build the brand. And I just love to sell the wine as well. And I got people excited about it. For me, it's the best food wine of any red varietal. So it's so versatile on any food type. Sommeliers get excited about it. If you come to a restaurant, it's the easiest thing to sell because they want 3 or 4 Cab Francs on the wine list. There wasn't a lot around those days. I mean, those days there was like 2005, there was probably 5 I can count on my hand now. And if you look in the platter, it's, it goes up to 50 and they're all pretty good. So it's great to see how this varietal grows. And yeah, always sommelier is excited when you go and I show them a Cab Franc. And I've created a style that's very much that the consumer also loves. So this is a Cab Franc that if they start drinking the bottle, they want another bottle. So I respect the Cab Franc style and the slight tea leaf vegetative character, but I also want a flavor, expression of flavor, and fruit sensation. That also must be so. That dark cherry, earthy character with the graphite character combined with the slight vegetal character in an undertone that gives the fresh sort of and mintiness to it. For me, about flavor and sensation and flavor profile, that's what people drink. And Cab Franc, what we made here on our farm, I think we've done it very well. So it's our biggest producing varietal on our farm. Believe it or not, it was 25% of our grapes out of our 16 hectares originally planted. We started planted in 2000, 2001. And now it's over 40% of our total farm's planting. So we're doing it in a very serious style, as it's very serious varietal. So yeah, I love it. It's also a thing that that's not a lot around. People are excited to learn about it or hear about it, and it's a funky, cool varietal as well. So yeah, it's a beloved varietal of mine for sure.
I've got Christian Banana watching the show at the moment. Welcome. Morgan Stain joining us too. Lovely to have you, Mark van Buren, as well. If you look back now, you'd probably ask yourself almost, well, why didn't we do this sooner? It's worked out so well. But when you did take the plunge, Anton, and decide, right, we're going to give Cabernet Franc a crack, what was the split between, I reckon this is a really good idea, and I'm being very optimistic because I don't really know how this is going to turn out?
That's a good question because we actually started very quickly because we only my dad bought the farm in 1978, but we only started. He was an engineer, so we only started planting the vineyards in 2000, 2001, and from there on. So 2005 was the first Cab Franc we've made, so that was early. So we took the plunge very early, and it was very risky. And I loved it. I wanted to do it. There was a lot of sort of, yes, what the hell is it? Are you crazy? But since starting to sell the wine that time, I had a sort of a thing on our stoop in our house. We sold all the wine in our house. Now we've got this fancy tasting with this beautiful view that you saw. But since up till COVID from 2002, we sold all the wine in the main house that my folks used to live. I live there now. But then I invited at those days the top sommeliers, restaurateurs, and I did a barrel tasting of the Clone 1, the Clone 214, and the Clone 312, and said, look, I want to make a Cab Franc. So the 2005, I blended everything together, but they all raved about it because they wasn't used to anything like that. So that gave me the confidence to do it. Thank God we did it. Otherwise, we would probably not have been here and didn't have the tasting room. So yeah, no, it's a huge thing for us, and it never gets boring for me. And I think we're blessed that we've got a fantastic terroir with our vineyards that's virus-free, good soil, northern aspect in a very cool climate. So I think we're very lucky that we've got the terroir, and I think that's critically important. You can't make Cab Franc out of extremely hot conditions, for instance. So yeah, we're lucky, and I'm glad that I can still be privileged to make it.
as we are privileged to drink it, or in my case, keep under lock and key, because I have a magnum of 2019 Reserve Cabernet Franc, and if my wife were to discover it, it would not last very long.
We should have that on the golf course, as you promised me when I'm back in Joburg.
Yeah, still due some golf, Anton. I do remember that.
Yeah.
We'll have to put that together in Cape Town. I keep that wine very closely locked up, as I do the Anthonij Rupert, because everybody in my family, as I said, loves to drink it. One of the challenges when you are so close to the wine industry is that at the moment you start liking something, you kind of subconsciously think, well, everybody must, because it's just so good. How much is that really the case, though, Dawie, with Cabernet Franc? How much is the wine world responding to it? Is it still very much a niche wine, or is Cabernet Franc, is your Cabernet Franc starting to reach a wider audience and more people starting to discover the joy and the magic of Cabernet Franc?
Well, Cab Franc is definitely picking up, because we also started in 2005, same as Anton. And but yeah, every year we see a more and more of an uptake on it. I think more people are exposed to it or trying it out, and something that they can sell it as well. Your popular varietal is still, your most popular in South Africa is still Merlot, your blends. But a Cab Franc and a proper Cab Franc is always going to be on the up and up. And stylistically, there's a lot of different styles in South Africa that I do like, because I think there's more of a diversity that's coming in as well. It's not only a handful anymore, it's actually a whole group of people making it. So there's actually, for different tastes, it's there different styles out there as well. People are playing around with it more as a single varietal. And we're seeing it in the sales as well. And we're seeing it in the interest when we get people at our tasting rooms as well, and also in the trade. But yeah, it's still a long way when it moves away from a niche market wine. But it's definitely growing.
In terms of how you approach the wine, most people have Cabernet Sauvignon as a reference point, and it's not a bad point of departure when looking at Cabernet Franc. If you were to explain to someone who'd never had a glass of Cabernet Franc before, but had drunk plenty of Cabernet Sauvignon, what are the similarities, differences? What's the introduction that guides them to thinking, you know what, Dawie sold me, I'm off to buy a bottle at Norman Goodfellows and try a glass this evening?
Well, what do you say? It's Cab Sav with a kick. No, I'm just joking. It's if a person loves a Cab Sav, you say, well, kind of mouthfeel or structure-wise, it can be a lot closer. But I will almost go towards stylistically, weight. Basically, what I would say will be the same, but fruit profile completely different. I would say it's almost like when someone has a wine for the first time, almost like a Cup Classique. To actually get someone to physically drink it, that's only way you're going to persuade someone to buy it again. So I always believe in the literal approach.
And you did mention a bit of age. I've had, I think, several of your bottles that go back the better part of a decade. Is there for you an ideal drinking window if you've got a style of Cabernet Franc like yours? Should we be ensuring that we do give it that bit of extra time to maximize the joy we shall derive?
Well, what we found is we currently, our current vintage is a 2018, so it's basically around 2 years in barrels. We're on about 50% new oak, off French. We only have a medium long toasting, so we want to have the wine, the fruit to be in front, and then after bottling, we'll lie the wine down for 3 years before we release it. So we found that the wine actually naturally softens up in the bottle, so I don't have to do any physical fining on the wines before bottling it. And usually only after 5 years, but easy up to 10 to 13 years. 15 years, you just have a lot of primary fruit as well.
Derek Prout-Jones, dutifully watching again. Derek, lovely to have you as part of our audience this evening. We're celebrating Cabernet Franc on Dan Really Likes Wine with Norman Goodfellows, with 4 superb producers thereof, 3 of whom call their Cabernet Franc Cabernet Franc, which is not unusual. It is, of course, Cabernet Franc, and so that's the name you might expect. There is one exception, though, who instead of calling her Cabernet Franc, cheerfully calls it Bruce. Not a tribute to anybody Australian, but instead to a rather well-known musician. Tell us the Bruce story, Callan.
My wines are inspired by music. So Bruce and Jim, but Bruce is inspired by one of my favorite musicians, Bruce Springsteen. And I don't actually provide tasting notes at the back of my bottles. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It kind of describes the musician with along with the wine. So Bruce, inspired by Bruce Springsteen, the boss.
And I think he in turn would be inspired by the wine. Don't tell Bruce Fordyce. He's still convinced that you named the wine after him. He'll be very disappointed to find this out. It would be a great bottle to drink alongside of some Bruce Springsteen soundtrack playing happily in the background. I spent some time recently with both Adi Bardenhorst and with Jasper Vickens. They've got music going in the cellar all day, every day, and it's all on vinyl. Is there music playing in the background when you're producing the Jim and the Bruce and the Garajeest collection?
Well, when we have electricity, but I also collect records. I've got a vinyl player as well. So, if not always out there, I am always like thinking of a song, and it's amazing how music just inspires us. So, wine itself is a science, but it's also an art, and it's about feeling, and it's about passion, and that's what music does. It resonates with the feeling and memory. So I just think it all ties in the connotation with music and feelings and food and art and wine. It's just a beautiful metaphor for everything that's important in life and who you share it with as well.
Again, I was having this conversation with somebody over the weekend, the art of pairing wine and music, and it sounds like a kind of slightly up in the air wine geek, people who think wine's far more important than it actually is. But there is a beauty to pairing a great piece of music with a great glass of wine.
Of course. I've actually got a YouTube channel, so I've created playlists. But I mean, that also includes, it's such an eclectic taste for me. So I've actually got some rap in there as well, French rap, all sorts. But I think it's all about the feeling and how your mood of the day. And they go hand in hand. So I don't think it's geeky at all. I think it's incredible. Pair everything you love with wine.
And pair everything, all your wine with music, and you'll be in for a great occasion. I'm going to ask you all a pairing question in a moment. I want to know what, with your respective Cabernet Francs, I'm having for dinner when I invite myself round in the near future. But while you all give that some thought, Callan, just quickly on that final music. So I'm fascinated by this music and wine combination. What from the boss do you think Bruce himself would like us to be listening to as we open the bottle of your Cabernet Franc?
Sure, that's an interesting one. I would like to think he would want us to listen to The River, because it's my favorite song, and he actually played it for me. So I think, Bruce is, for me, he's the people's musician. And I do find Cabernet Franc kind of the people's wine. It's very approachable. And I would put on The River. It's one of my favorite songs. So I would hope that Bruce would want us to be listening to that whilst we're sipping on a glass or a bottle of Bruce Cabernet Franc.
Very, very quickly, I can't let this one go. Bruce played it for you. Elaborate.
Yeah. So my mum and I we arrived super duper early for one of his shows, as one does, and we were ushered into kind of where he sets up and he does a sound check, which at the time we didn't know he was going to do that. We were at the show. I feel like it was about 6 to 8 hours early, we sat down. We made friends with a few other diehard fans, and next minute we see boots and a bit of music go on, and it's him. And I had made a poster asking him to play The River. So he did actually play it. Oh. And I have videos.
Oh, good for you, Bruce. I have it on good authority that Bruce Springsteen never misses an episode of Dan Really Likes Wine. He has to watch some of them recorded.
Oh gosh, there go all the royalties. Thanks, Dan.
Oh dear. Let's head back to Warwick and the home of previously Norma Radcliffe, now JD Pretorius. It's always difficult, JD, when you've got a fairly wide array of wine, as you do at Warwick, where there is so much that you make so well, and yet I think possibly the history, possibly conversations we've had in the past. But I have always had a sense that for you, the Cabernet Franc adventure is one that you particularly revel in.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. We've, to give you an idea, Cabernet Franc plantings have now surpassed Cabernet Sauvignon as of last year. We're planting another patch this year. So we're putting a lot of faith behind it. Kind of equal parts Cabernet and Cabernet Sauvignon make up the bulk of the vineyard on Warwick, and it makes up kind of 50% the lion's share of Trilogy, obviously single variety Cabernet Franc, and then 2-3 other blends that it also makes its way into. So it really is a variety that not only does super well on its own for us, but we use it in a multiple of blends. I think it is extremely versatile, and it's similar to what Anton said earlier, the different clones on the market. You can really kind of push the style, and we try and do that, ranging from very light 12.5%, really pushing the limit. We're experimenting with a whole bunch of stuff, and then kind of the more classical stuff where we do everything sorted and hand sorted and very kind of specific on the riper end of the spectrum. But it's a very, very versatile variety that you can ultimately make into vast different types of styles. And I think it's something that we'll probably see more of in future, not only in Warwick, but kind of all around. It also crops well, so there's a kind of economic side to it as well, which some cases it's part of it's kind of really to its own detriment. So you have to manage that crop level. But yeah, I think it's really for Warwick, it's a no-brainer for us. It's a variety that has really kind of found its feet, and we're putting a lot of effort behind it.
I have no doubt that will put a very large smile on the face of Norma Radcliffe, whose legacy remains so firmly entrenched in the history of Warwick. Does that add just a little touch of pressure, JD, knowing that you are carrying on the mantle of an extraordinary woman, and in particular, this grape that she really kind of gave birth to in its own right in South Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously there's a lot of pressure from the Radcliffe family in the sense that they've built truly a household and iconic brand in the country. So we obviously want to honor that, and also build on that, take that to the next level. Now we've gone into a new chapter in the last 5 years, and now it's really I don't want to say we want to rewrite the history, but it's really how can we define the next kind of 40 years of the business and the next 40 years of the brand, and ultimately not losing sight of where we come from. And building onto that, and then just kind of really honoring what we've done up to now. So yes, big challenge, but one that we're all very keen on and very proud of. So challenge accepted.
And I know it comes with a full blessing of Norma, who is one of your many, many admirers. Cabernet Franc, then, a lot stronger in terms of what you're doing, a lot stronger South Africa as a whole. If we look, let's say, the next 5 years or so, do you think we are on a continued upward curve, or is it just going to be a gentle nudge forward, given that there is so much competition amongst the varying varietals for people to drink great wine in South Africa?
Definitely, there's a lot of competition, but you must remember we've got a very young wine drinking culture, and in essence, the culture is really kind of 20 to 30 years old on a broad spectrum. So people are learning, they're engaging, they're growing every year. We see more and more interesting varietals. Obviously, we all started with kind of basics: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, maybe Shiraz if you were extravagant or something. But I think there's so many varieties that are a lot better suited to our various different climatic regions. So I do think that as the market develops and as the industry itself develops, we'll see a lot of different things coming to the fore in the next 20 to 30 years. Things that are better suited to droughts and kind of warmer climates. And I think that will ultimately just make people more aware that there are more varieties than Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot available. And ultimately, the more kind of experimental people are, the more and interested they'll become, the better it will be for what is currently seen as kind of minority planting. So I think the future in the next 30 years are going to be super exciting for not only Cabernet Franc, for all sorts of little wondrous things that are going to come out in various forms.
I am very happy to hear that. I know Siobhan Thompson from Woza will be very happy to hear that, joining our audience. Lovely to have you watching this evening, Siobhan. Heading back to Rainbow's End, we've spoken about legacy in terms of Norma Radcliffe. There's also a wonderful family legacy for you, Anton, working with your dad, working with your brother. I think your sister's involved in the business as well, if I'm not mistaken. You look back as where you are now, not just on the success of Cabernet Franc, but also on this really cool family story of producing something really special in the wine industry.
Yeah, no, we're very, very proud about our family. Look, we don't have legacies and generation farms. My dad bought the farm in 1978, and he had a dream that maybe to do something with the farm. And I was one of 4 kids, and me and my brother Francois said that we want to go on with the farm or try and do something with it if we have the opportunity. And it came about that we got the opportunity. So yeah, we're very, very thankful for my dad that he, created the platform, and he bought this piece of land in 1978. I'm not going to say the number, but it was, you can't even buy a tractor tube now for that price. But so he had a vision here. He saw a piece of land. It was only bush here. There was nothing here. Now it's, if you go over Elswicht and you see all the farms. I mean, the Lima was the pioneer of starting here in the 80s, very scientifically. So extremely lucky that my dad had the vision to see the piece of land. It was just a question of money when we could start the whole thing, and he helped a little bit, not like a lot of other big business companies, but he helped a little bit there. And yeah, me and my brother, luckily that we can work together. We've been working here for the last 20 years together, and luckily I think our skill sets are totally different. So that helps a lot, and it's sort of everything goes naturally now with the experience that we both have. So when we pick, there's no fight between winemaker and viticulturist. My brother is responsible for the whole farming side and viticulture. So yeah, we're lucky that we've got the dynamics and that we're so different and with different skill sets. So that's it's dying out families that work together. You hear a few great stories, but you also hear more not so great stories. We're very privileged and proud of it. Yeah, and hopefully, yeah, as long as me and my brother lives, it will go on until we fall over. So.
Well, on a diet of great Cabernet Franc, you have many years ahead of you, I am certain. I must ask you very quickly about that view. You referenced it at the start of the show. Do you still catch yourself sometimes just staring out across that valley and almost shaking your head in disbelief at quite how beautiful it is?
When you have a really bad day, which happens a lot in farming when things go wrong, you've got your tasting room, but there's now, we're so lucky that the place is so full so often but yeah, there's so many beautiful spots on the farm. I go and look for sanity up the mountain, and it is actually surreal. I mean, I grew up here. I was in 1978. My dad bought the farm. I was 1. And all our 4 kids had an amazing upbringing here, living in this beauty. But I really got to realize it when after I started going in 2000 overseas, worked in London, then went to France, worked there in a cellar. But especially when I was in London, when I came back, I just felt, yes, we are so lucky to be here, and we have to make this thing work. So I think you need to get a bit of perspective of the rest of the world and to see how lucky we are, and how lucky we are in the Western Cape for the privileged people that lives in decent places. I think the Western Cape is, in my opinion, I've traveled a lot with this wine marketing and so on. I haven't really explored the countries because it's in and out and it's on a budget, so I haven't. But I get a feeling of everything, and I still believe, South Africa, the Western Cape, I'm still so proud of our country, and I think the Western Cape is one of the best places to live in, and our differential and terroirs. You've got our area, you've got so many fantastic areas in the Western Cape. So, and people are starting to realize it. The whole wine world is starting to realize after hard work with a lot of marketing from a lot of companies and a lot of individual winemakers. So, yeah, I would like to be positive, eh?
If you need a dose of positivity, all you need is a trip out to Rainbow's End. The combination of you and Cabernet Franc are staggering. Helen Botha, Cab Franc is my favorite red. One of many fans out there. Helen, lovely to have you watching the show. Very quickly, because we're almost done with what's been a delight celebrating Cabernet Franc. I did promise our guests that I would find out what they're making me for dinner when I invite myself round, as I'm planning to do with all 4 of you. JD, let's kick off with you. If I'm round to the Pretoriuses for an evening of Cabernet Franc, what's coming out of the kitchen to go with it?
So I think our Cab Franc, Warwick Cab Franc pairs particularly well with very classic Greek lamb. I think the flavors, that kind of little bit of herbalness, the little bit of spice that you get from there, and floral elements just really kick up a storm. And I think that's something that you should be able to approve of.
He's a shrewd man, Mr. Pretorius. He knows I have a Greek wife, and in fact, we celebrated the day after our wedding at Warwick, so we know the space well. A Greek leg of lamb and Cabernet Franc would be a delightful combination. Although I see Alana Bernhardt is suggesting that a Stanrib for Dawie might be the way to go. Well, let's jump over to Dawie. Dawie, is it a Stanrib, or would it be something else that you're dishing up for us with your Cabernet Franc?
Well, I'm trying to think now what's a Stanrib in English, but no, usually Cab Franc will go with a cold, rainy day in the Western Cape with pretty much anything. But yeah, I'll always tend to be going towards a Springbok roast with some dried fruit on a polenta with copious amounts of Cab Franc when it's very cold with a fire going. Probably will be one of my bets, but Stanrib will also be way up there as well.
They sound like 2 great combinations. I love the thought of that fruit just adding an extra dimension to both the meal and the pairing opportunity with the Cabernet Franc. Anton, if I'm coming around to you and your brother for dinner, what's on the menu for us with the Cabernet Franc?
Well, we're first going to indulge you with a few bottles of Cab Franc so that you don't moan about the food. But luckily, my wife is a very good cook, and yeah, I obviously love braaiing, but yeah, Cab Franc goes with so many things. You can go chicken dishes. You can even go on some seafood, spicy dishes. But I'm going to be very boring and say, for me, I would go for a picanha steak on the raw side with a black mushroom sauce. I think I'll go with that boring old farmer suggestion, but specifically picanha steak that I love. But yeah, there's so many things. Even nice pastas with a mushroom sauce also would go lovely. But yeah, my thing would be a picanha steak, medium rare with mushroom sauce.
Simple flavors, but blending classically with the Cabernet Franc. Helen Botha, I'm doing a 6-week aged sirloin steak for dinner tonight. Please send us a pin, Helen. We'll all be around for dinner this evening. Looking forward to it. Right, Callan, I know there's Bruce Springsteen playing in the background. I know there's excellent Cabernet Franc being served. What are you giving me for dinner?
Well, we might have to go out to eat, but I would definitely go for, oh, that's my cat, Olive, who's in my camera there. That's her tail. I would definitely go for tender braised lamb shanks with mash. I think that is my perfect pairing with Bruce Cabernet Franc.
Ooh, that's the fourth suggestion. And the fourth fantastic suggestion, all of which have me salivating somewhat at the thought of both the food and the wine. I've been trying to work out my suggestion over the last little while. Thanks to Sabrina Gaillot, who's one of my favorite chefs, a wonderful Persian recipe for a leg of lamb, but done in Greek yogurt with plenty of cinnamon and turmeric and paprika and loads of Eastern spices that I think could work quite nicely. Alternatively, I like the look of those lamb shanks. I've also got a Middle Eastern dish with black bolt garlic and balsamic vinegar and loads of tomatoes. I think all of these dishes just speak to food of richness and food of comfort. And if wine were to be a comfort food, I think Cabernet Franc would probably be the ideal representation thereof. And if it comes from one of the four of you, then so much the better. So guys, thank you. It's always lovely having all four of you on the show, and thank you very much for being part of it. Thank you for making great Cabernet Franc and for sending it out into the South African winescape, because it really has become such a cool and exciting part of our national offering, and you guys are a really big part of that. So to JD, to Anton, to Callan, to Dawie, guys, thank you very much indeed. I'll be emailing you all tomorrow with my free dates for dinner, which I'm looking forward to. And Anton will precede ours with a round of golf, because that is long overdue. We'll bring Greg Dawie along as well.
We need a game of golf after harvest. We're finishing this week. So.
Oh dear. Guys, have a lovely evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
And stock up for winter. And I'll see you guys soon for dinner.
Ooh.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. You're welcome.
Yes.
There we go. Anton Malan, winemaker at Rainbow's End, wonderful family operation. Callan Williams at the Garajeest, the Bruce, Cabernet Franc, Dawie Botha from Anthonij, Rupert and JD Pretorius from Warwick. A masterful collection of Cabernet Franc producers. Elmarie Rabi saying two great examples of Stellenbosch Cabernet Franc in there amongst the four. Elmarie, of course, has got a slight nod in the direction of Stellenbosch. Four great examples, two particularly good ones from Stellenbosch, and lovely to have them on the show. That does it for this evening. Have a wonderful week. Stay warm, stay safe, keep drinking great South African wine. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. We'll see you back again with the magazine show on Thursday, live again next Monday. Have a great wine week. Goodbye.